Have you ever been in a relationship where you and your partner just couldn't get along? So you kept looking for new relationships, hoping for a better outcome, only to find yourself stuck in the same cycle? Psychologists have a term for it, but they rarely say it out loud to patients because it sounds like blame. They call it repetition compulsion. The idea is simple and deeply uncomfortable. Human beings are unconsciously drawn to repeat the emotional dynamics of their earliest relationships, especially the painful ones. Not because they enjoy pain, because the nervous system mistakes familiarity for safety. You don't attract toxic people because you're broken. You attract them because part of you thinks that's what love is supposed to feel like. And the most disturbing part is that it works invisibly. You don't feel yourself selecting, you feel yourself falling. In the 1950s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby began documenting something that nobody in his field wanted to take seriously. He had been working with children in post-war London, children who had been separated from their parents during the evacuation, and he kept noticing the same thing. When the children were reunited with their mothers, they didn't simply relax. Many of them clung and screamed and then pushed the mother away. They were desperate for closeness and terrified of it at the same time. Bowlby spent the next 2 decades building what became attachment theory. The core idea was this: the bond between a child and their earliest caregiver doesn't just shape how the child feels about that one person, it shapes the entire internal model the child builds of what relationships are, what love feels like, what safety feels like, what to expect when you get close to someone. He called it the internal working model. And once it's built, it runs quietly in the background of every relationship that follows. The problem is that it gets built before the child has any say in the matter. A psychologist named Mary Ainsworth extended Bowlby's work in the 1960s and 1970s through a simple experiment called the strange situation. She placed a mother and a young child in a room with toys. Then a stranger entered, then the mother left, then the mother came back. Ainsworth filmed what happened and coded it obsessively. What she found was that children fell into distinct patterns. Some children explored freely when the mother was present, cried briefly when she left, and calmed quickly when she returned. Ainsworth called these children securely attached. Their nervous system had learned a reliable equation. I need comfort, I signal distress, comfort arrives. But another group behaved differently. These children were anxious even before the mother left. They stayed close to her, barely exploring. When she left, they were inconsolable. When she returned, something strange happened. They reached for her and pushed her away at the same time. They wanted comfort and couldn't accept it. Ainsworth called this anxious attachment. And then there was a third group. When the mother left, these children barely reacted. When she returned, they ignored her. They had learned at a level below language that signaling need produced nothing, so they stopped signaling. Ainsworth called this avoidant attachment. These patterns, first observed in toddlers in a university laboratory in the 1970s, were not temporary. Research that followed these children into adulthood found that the pattern remained largely stable. The anxiously attached child became the adult who could not stop checking their phone after a difficult conversation. The avoidant child became the adult who went cold the moment someone got too close. And here is where it gets complicated. In the 1980s, researchers began studying how adult attachment patterns influence partner selection. What they found was uncomfortable enough that some of the papers took years to get published. Anxiously attached adults were significantly more likely to be drawn to avoidant partners. And avoidant adults, when they chose to pursue a relationship at all, were more likely to end up with anxiously attached partners. On the surface, this makes no sense. Why would someone who desperately needs reassurance repeatedly choose a partner who withholds it? Why would someone who needs space keep ending up with someone who can't give it? Because it isn't logic that's doing the selecting. The anxiously attached person doesn't walk into a room and consciously choose the most emotionally unavailable person there. What they experience is something that feels like magnetism, an inexplicable pull, a sense that this particular person is different, interesting, worth the effort. What they are actually feeling is familiarity. The dynamic of reaching for someone who sometimes pulls away and sometimes comes close is the exact dynamic their nervous system was built inside. It doesn't feel painful yet. It feels like home. There is a specific kind of person who is most likely to end up in this cycle, and it is not the person you would expect. It is not someone weak. It is not someone naive or lacking in intelligence. The research is consistent on this. The people most likely to repeat toxic relationship patterns are frequently the most empathetic people in any room. They are the ones who can read emotional states in others with unusual accuracy. They are the ones who absorb other people's pain as if it were their own. They are the ones who extend patience and understanding in amounts that genuinely exhaust them. This capacity, which looks like a gift, is often the result of necessity. A child who grows up in an unpredictable emotional environment learns to read the room because reading the room is how they survive. They become extraordinarily attuned to the moods and needs of the people around them. They learn to manage, to soothe, to stay calm when things are not calm. They become the kind of adult that troubled people feel deeply comfortable around. And troubled people find them, not through any conspiracy, not through cruelty, through the same invisible process. The person who needs someone to manage their chaos feels an extraordinary pull towards someone who has spent their whole life managing other people's chaos. It fits together perfectly, like two specific shapes that were made to interlock. The problem is that one of those shapes is a wound. The psychologist Bessel Kolk spent decades studying trauma and its effects on the body and behavior. In his work, he described something he called the body's memory, the idea that traumatic emotional experiences are not stored the way ordinary memories are stored. They live in the nervous system itself, in the body's automatic responses, in the tightening of the chest when a certain tone of voice appears, in the way the stomach drops when someone goes quiet. Kolk observed that people who had experienced relational trauma that came from the people who were supposed to love them, did not usually recognize it as trauma. They recognized it as love, or at least as what love had always felt like. Intensity, unpredictability, the high of being chosen followed by the fear of being abandoned. That sequence, which to an outside observer looks like a warning, to the person inside it feels like evidence that the relationship matters. The heart rate that rises when something feels uncertain. The obsessive thinking that kicks in when someone pulls away. The relief that floods in when contact is restored. This is not weakness. This is a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. So what does this type of person look like from the outside? They are generous in ways that leave them depleted. They give the benefit of the doubt long past the point where the doubt should have won. They are better at articulating their partner's pain than their own. They apologize quickly even when they are not wrong because conflict feels unbearable. They mistake intensity for depth. They confuse someone needing them with someone loving them. And when the relationship ends, they do not simply grieve the person. They grieve the version of the person they believed was almost there, the one they were just about to reach, the one who, with a little more patience, a little more love, a little more time, would have finally been consistent. That person was never there, but the hope of them is almost impossible to release. The researchers who study this are careful to say something that often gets lost in the popular conversation about toxic relationships. The pattern is not destiny. Attachment styles are not fixed permanently at age 2 and sealed. The nervous system that learned one way of relating can learn another. The process is slow. It requires something that feels, at first, deeply suspicious to someone who has spent their life in emotional chaos. It requires experiencing stability and allowing themselves to believe it. That is harder than it sounds, because when a genuinely safe relationship appears, it often doesn't feel like the real thing. It feels quiet where there used to be noise, consistent where there used to be drama, predictable where there used to be the electricity of not knowing. To a nervous system calibrated to chaos, safety can feel, at first, like boredom. Some people leave the safe relationship to find the intensity again without ever understanding why. John Bowlby worked until he was 86 years old. In his final writings, he came back again and again to a single conclusion, that the earliest bonds we form do not just shape our relationships, they shape our understanding of what we deserve. A child who is loved consistently learns, at a level below language, that they are worth loving. A child who is loved unpredictably learns something else. They learn that love must be earned, that it must be chased, that it is always slightly out of reach, and that the reaching itself is what love feels like. That child grows up. They walk into rooms. They feel the pull towards certain people and not others. They call it chemistry. They call it connection. They call it finally finding someone who really understands them. What they are finding, in most cases, is the shape of something they already know. The pattern is not a flaw. It was once a solution. It was the best way a young nervous system had to navigate an environment it could not control. The problem is that the environment changed and the solution didn't. You are not broken. You are running very old software in a world that has moved on without telling you. The question is not why you keep choosing this. You already know why. The question is whether you are ready to let familiar stop feeling like safe.